had been known. In the 1800, early 1800s, they started discovering some little things called Ceres, which we now call asteroids. Ceres was the first, and Vesta was the fourth. Asteroid Pasachoff, I'm very proud of, is 5100. My wife's asteroid, 86109. And there are a lot of these asteroids, but by the time we got to 1850, and so they were called planets at that time, just more planets. And then by the time they got to about 1850, there were over 50 of them, and it was just getting unwieldy. So they started calling all those little ones asteroids, leaving the 8 planets. And then in 1930, they at the Lowell Observatory in near Flagstaff, Arizona, a young man named Clyde Tombaugh had been hired to help Percival Lowell look for what they then called Planet X. And it turns out that because he was just such a good observer and looked at so many images on the photographic plates he took, he found this little moving object, which they thought was the result of a prediction, and was this 9th planet. And then it got called Pluto. There's actually a new article about how Pluto got named coming out in the Journal of Astronomical History and Heritage, which is now in press, and that'll be available online, from Tom Hockey, the University of Iowa. And because the story is a little girl in London gave the name Pluto, but I gather that there really were about 150 people who wrote in with that suggestion. And 6 months later, there'd been so much discussion that Walt Disney named a dog in the cartoons Pluto. But anyway, it was discovered with the idea that the Pluto had 90% the mass of the Earth. And so it became like a planet. But in the 1960s, somebody discovered, Charles Cole especially, discovered a moon around Pluto. And going back to work that Isaac Newton did, when you have a moon going around something, you can find out how much mass that thing in the center has. And it turns out that Pluto was actually trivial in size. It was a fifth of a hundredth. That's a fifth of a percent of the mass of the Earth. So it wasn't big enough to be a Pluto, to be a planet after all, and never had been. And it had just been mistakenly thought to be 90% instead of a tenth of 1% the mass of the Earth. So and then in the 90s, somebody found another object way out there because the telescopes were getting better that was thought to be a little bigger than Pluto. So you start finding these things, and we now think there are at least 100 things around the size of Pluto or so, or even bigger out there, and 1,000 that are just a little smaller. So we don't want the third graders of this world to be memorizing 100 or 1,000 names. So Pluto got its the status it deserves, which is what's called this ordinary kind of thing in the solar system called a dwarf planet. Now, I know that's not what you often read, but I think that's more accurate. I was actually at the meeting in Prague in what was then Czechoslovakia of the International Astronomical Union, and I actually voted against the change at that time.
Really?
But I came to realize it was right. I actually had a little contribution to it because there was some discussion before, and the dwarf planet is defined that it clears its neighborhood, which was never completely defined, but had enough mass that it didn't have a lot of other stuff going around going around the sun the same way. And I realized that that they hadn't actually excluded moons like the big moons of Jupiter, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callista. So I raised my hand and I got called on.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, the moons are not excluded here. You want to exclude the moons? And the scientist in the front on the platform said, oh yeah, you're right. And they opened the PowerPoint and changed the rules on the screen of the PowerPoint. And you know that when they're editing the PowerPoint in the middle of a meeting, that they're not really prepared, or you're not really prepared. But
That is true.
anyway, that led to this change. But I
Very interesting.
repeat,
Glenn just
Pluto
wrote
was
in.
promoted to be this important object.
Yeah. Glenn just wrote me on the side saying that he was on his way home when he found out that Pluto had now been included as a dwarf planet.
Well,
So
that just shows you have to stay to the end of a meeting. A lot of people left, even Owen Gingerich, who'd been in charge of a committee about it, left. People thought that wasn't going to be controversial. And so a lot of knowledgeable people left the meeting already for the closing ceremony at which this change was made. But I do think it was the right thing to do.
Wow. By the way, Glenn, that's quite a totality you got going there. It's been over about 15 minutes now. What Saros is that?
I'm secretly on an airplane extending it.
Okay. I was just wondering. Okay.
So
Dr.
let me
Pasachoff,
show you something that I just got, actually.
uh,
My wife, Naomi, and I were in Pasadena. I spent some time last year. I have a visiting appointment at the Carnegie Observatories, which runs Mount Wilson and Las Campanas. And there's an artist named Leah Halloran. Let me try to share my screen and put this up, and we'll see if I can figure out how to do that. So here is the PowerPoint on the screen, and now there's the PowerPoint.
you should be able to share it.
And now I've got to share.
There it goes.
No, I think that's full screen. I didn't get the share screen. Here it is, viewing. No,
What'd you say, Beck? Click on it again.
I got to find the sharing.
Oh, you have to click on what you're sharing. Bet just said.
You're sharing your Zoom screen, not your PowerPoint or whatever.
Yeah, so now I got, so there's a way of sharing this.
You can minimize your Zoom screen to bring out the other screen that you want to show.
Are you seeing?
We're just seeing your Zoom screen. It's blank white, which just says Zoom in blue letters. If you go back to stop sharing screen.
I had this worked out. View options. No.
If you go back to stop sharing screen and then click on the screen you want us to see and then click on share screen again. That might work.
How's this one?
Charles, I'm getting a note that says that I'm viewing Sophia Gazarian's screen.
Do you have this one now?
It says, yeah, we see it now.
Okay. So anyway, there was there is an artist named Leah Halloran who was having an art show, and she's actually writing a book with Kip Thorne, who's writing poems, and she's doing the illustrations. Anyway, she did this painting, which looks like an eclipse to me, except it's kind of a double sun, and it looks like the magnetic field and big magnetic loops, and it's kind of doubled like Star Wars. But anyway, Leo, so I was able to buy this painting, which is now on the wall right outside the room where I'm talking. And it really is very nice. It's something called a cyanotype, which is a 19th century kind of reproduction, and then she's used acrylics to paint what looks to me like the magnetic field on it. But really, she was commissioned. There she is with me in her studio in Glendale, California, because the original she made was 12 feet high. And it's being hung in the Flatiron Institute in New York City, downtown around 25th Street.
Yeah.
And so she has various mock-ups and tries for it.
Does she specialize in astronomical art?
Yes. She does a lot of interesting astronomical art. And then 2 years ago, in 2017, 2.5 years ago, I helped curate with the curator, Steve Nolan, at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, a show on eclipse-related artistic things. And one of the pieces was by a California artist named Russell Crotty, and I knew his work on globular clusters and some other things. But in any case, this is an acrylic piece he made, and there were little diagrams. You can see my arrow
I love that one. I've seen that in person.
of things moving around, but obviously we have an eclipse there. So I've been interested in not only the eclipses themselves, but also in art that's related to the eclipses. So I've been working with an art historian, Roberta Olson. We have a new book out called Cosmos, the Art and Science of the Universe. And one of the 10 chapters is about, oh, thank you. There I see Charles has a cover of the book out there. And so that's an oil painting of the eclipse, of an eclipse 100 years ago. At that time, they didn't have these fast films or fast electronic stuff we have there. So the US Naval Observatory, for their expedition to Oregon, hired an artist named Howard Russell Butler, who could take notes very quickly in the couple of minutes he had during the eclipse, and then transform it into paint for hours later.
Beautiful.
And he did a big set of 3 for 1918, 1923, 1925 that hung for many years in the Hayden Planetarium in New York. And then there are a couple of half-size versions around too. One in Philadelphia, one in Buffalo. We were to borrow one from Buffalo. There's one something in Staten Island. But in any case, that's a Howard Russell Butler oil
Beautiful.
painting there.
At college at Buffalo, we had the Albright Knox Museum, which I'm guessing that's where.
No, it was actually, and there's a science museum.
Oh, there, that's you, yeah.
Yeah, it's at the science museum.
Very nice.
So anyway, I've not only been working on the art, but as we were discussing, I've been working on the science for a long time. And here are some early results we have from last July. I was on the center line with some of my students taking observations. And then after that was all arranged, there was a competition for some slots to observe from the top of the Saratoga Inter-American Observatory. And I was able to apply and win one of those spots. So I had 4 colleagues who went to observe from there. And then simultaneously, so that was about 2 minutes and a quarter there. We had about 2 minutes and a half on the center line. And then Glenn, who's there, had his plane out over the Pacific, where he got 8.5 minutes, which is just incredible. But we did have some compensating advantage of dry land for sturdy cameras and not have to look through a plane window, et cetera. But anyway, we've been publishing some articles and increasingly, and in fact, this week, two of my seniors at Williams College have been turning in their senior theses. And on the screen here, you see some images that our colleague Aras Voulgaris made with us. And on the left and the right, you see the diamond ring effect and the Bailey's bead at the beginning and at the end of the eclipse, with totality in the middle. And we just had the most perfectly clear day. Here's a list of our sites.
Not on Facebook. It's not.
It's not showing on Facebook. It just shows in Zoom. Huh?
Oh,
So I don't know if you have Zoom.
yeah, no, that's my mother talking to Bet. She says it. I have it on. It's okay. Go ahead. Keep going.
Well, it's not okay if the Facebook people can't see it.
Let me
And
see.
I'll talk more than show pictures.
It's on YouTube live streaming now as well.
Um,
Yeah.